Traktor from Native Instruments, or NI, has become something of an outlier in the DJ technology business. The software still has a large and dedicated fan base, predominantly in the electronic music scene, although I do know a couple of open format DJs who still prefer it over other platforms. But when it comes to new hardware from big manufacturers like Alpha Theta or InMusic, especially at the entry level, Traktor isn't really in the conversation anymore. Which means, unless that changes, NI will remain reliant on their own devices to entice people into the Traktor ecosystem. Today, we're looking at the new MX2 and asking, is this enough? The MX2 is, as far as I can tell, the replacement for the Control S2 Mark III, which is being discontinued. Like the S2, it has 2 channels, but it does have a few extra new features which justify it costing a little more at €399 as opposed to $350 for the S2. It will be interesting to see how those list prices compare to street prices though. The S2 could be had for a lot less than that, and the street price for the S3, a 4-channel unit, is only €460. So where the pricing ends up once the MX2 hits the shelves will have a big impact on its value proposition. As you'd expect, the MX2 is compatible with and comes with Traktor Pro 4 on Windows and Mac, but there's no mention of support for any other software. I'd assume Virtual DJ will have a mapping for it, they do for everything, but the question for me would be around Algorithms DJ. Other recent Traktor controllers have been mapped for that on both computers and iOS, and the MX2 does appear to be class compliant. DJ on my iPhone saw the audio interface, so hopefully that will be an option in the future. The first thing which stood out to me with the MX2 is how large it is. I saw renders and the price and assumed it was a fairly compact device, but it's really not. It's substantially larger than something like a DDJ Flex 4. That, of course, has upsides and downsides. It's less practical to transport, but it does give you a lot of space to work with, and as a result, the MX2 never feels at all cramped when you're using it. It's clearly part of the new generation of Traktor devices from NI, which kicked off with the lovely X1 Mark III. These all share a common design language with a very minimal look, all black everything and LEDs under the base, visible through a transparent plastic shell. You can customize the standard color of those and they change to show you when tracks are out of sync or looping, or when they're about to end. I'm not entirely convinced of the functional necessity of all this. There's nothing that couldn't be done with LED indicators on the top panel, but there's no doubt it does look extremely cool in a low light environment. The MX2 is very much just a controller. There's no hardware mixer in here, and that's reflected in the connections. On the front you have both sizes of headphone socket nicely tucked away under the top panel. Heading around to the rear there are 2 sets of outputs, neither of them balanced. There's a pair of RCAs and then a stereo 1/8" jack. This is fine on a beginner controller, but keep in mind if you want to connect directly to a big sound system you'll need to go up to something like the S3, which has balanced XLR main outs and a separate booth output. There's a mic input on a jack socket, not an XLR or a combo socket, which has a volume level next to it on the rear. There's no control for that on the top panel, aside from the on-off button. Then moving across we see a USB-C port for connecting to your computer. The first time we've seen that on a piece of Traktor hardware, which totally makes sense to me and I'm delighted to see it. What delights me less, and to be frank actively annoys me, is that next to the USB is the power supply input, which is not optional. The MX2 simply doesn't work unless it's plugged into the wall. This is understandable on higher end kits, but on a beginner controller it's an inconvenience which some users might find to be a deal breaker. It's not even a standard USB power adapter or anything like that, it's a specific 15V NI one, so if you lose or break that, your MX2 is out of action until you get a replacement. Now, NI have suggested to me that this is needed to give enough juice to things like the headphone output volume, which has historically been an issue on some of their older hardware. But other manufacturers don't seem to have this problem, so I don't know why they do. If it was optional, I wouldn't mind. Maybe their headphone output would be quieter on USB bus power, fine. But to have the unit be completely dead without it is a problem for me. Let's say you're DJing at like a family barbecue in the garden. You've got a battery-powered laptop, a battery-powered speaker, but that MX2, well, you're going to have to find a plug socket for that. In terms of build quality, it's up to the usual NI standards. Yes, the MX2 is pretty much all plastic, but it feels very well engineered and well made. I've never had any problems with the way this company build their hardware, and there is no change here. Their stuff always takes a beating. Sound quality is decent for the money with a clean output, which doesn't really colour the signal in any way. Again, typical Native Instruments. Quick demo then of the features on the MX2. We will start with the mixer section. And we'll look at the faders. These are fairly generic faders, heavier feel on the ups, lighter feel on the crossfader. Nothing to write home about, but also At this price point, nothing to complain about either. We have the Q selector switches and your mic on and off, and you've just got the level control on the rear for that. One thing I will point out to you, it is going through Traktor and then back out to your outputs and back out to your headphones. So when you're speaking on the mic in the headphones, you will hear a bit of a delay there. If you find that kind of thing disconcerting and you do a lot of like streaming and whatnot where you're on the mic a lot, yeah, this might not be the board for you, but it does work absolutely fine. We've got the mixer effects, which I really like. We have a filter as standard, and you can turn them on or off individually. But we also have 4 more in the center. We've got reverb there. There's post fader, but not post crossfader. That's standard for like Pioneer DJMs and whatnot, so I'm not complaining about that. Then I've got a delay here, white noise, and time gate. But the thing is, you can go into Traktor and you can choose different effects for each of these. No issues there. So I really like that customizability. And as well, you can assign different ones to different sides. So if I want filter on this side, I can do that. Overall, yeah, big fan of those mixer effects. The EQs, you know, everything on here is software mixing. So if you want to adjust the way these EQs perform, you do that in Traktor itself. But the knobs themselves feel really good, very sturdy, and plenty of space around them. This is a large controller, nothing on here feels cramped. We have the headphone output level and the Q Master blend knob. Now there is loads of headroom on the headphone output, which is really important because apparently one of the reasons why this thing needs a power supply is to ensure you have that healthy output level for your headphones, and yep, they've delivered on that, so I guess mission accomplished. We have LED meters for the 2 decks, and there is an LED underneath the main output there, which I assume is a peak LED, but you have the limiter in Traktor, so really you should never ever be seeing that. And of course, your gain controls for the 2 channels as well. We do have the assignments for the pattern player and the effects units, but I'll come back to those in a second. Now we come to the decks themselves, and yeah, these jog wheels are pretty nice. You know, there's no playhead indicator, so if you're doing lots of scratching, obviously that is meaningless as soon as you let the track go. But they're a good size. The capacitive top surfaces are very responsive. And this kind of ribbed pattern on the outside feels really good when you're pitch bending. You can turn the whole thing into a pitch bend all the time kind of jog wheel and just do away with the scratching stuff by hitting jog mode. But yeah, overall, I'm a big fan of these jogs. The kind of the weight of them, the momentum of them, when you let them go, they feel very quick to kind of get to the point, and it feels natural. One thing I will point out, if you're new to Traktor, the latency, when I put my settings, I reset everything to default before doing this demo, and it set my latency to 512, which meant these jog wheels felt absolutely horrible. There was loads of latency there. So I brought it right back down to 64, and now, yeah, they're feeling good again. But just bear that in mind. So if you find the scratching performance underwhelming to begin with, just check your latency settings inside the software itself. We have a flux reverse. Let me load up another track. Well, I'll do it over this side. So we've got flux reverse, and then we have the flux mode itself. You can turn on or off, so you can jump around or scratch in the track and it will carry on from where you were. Then coming down here, we've got the shift button for various functions. The Q and play buttons are really nice. They're clicky, but they're like super responsive, and they're big, great shape to them. And the same goes for the pads as well, really. They're a little bit more kind of rubbery feel, a bit more travel to them. Still clicky at the bottom though. And again, really responsive. I like those a lot. When it comes to pad modes, we don't really have a lot here. And this is one area where I think a lot of new DJs might look at the MX2 and wonder if maybe this is the one for them. Because actually, we've got the first one is hot cues, right? That's great. We've got 8 of those, all good. The second one is stems. Now, you can't do stems for streaming tracks, for example, inside Traktor, and you need to pre-analyze all your stems. So for a lot of tracks, as in this one that's loaded right now, that's not an option. We've got pattern player there. You know, you might use pattern player, you might not. You might have 2 effects units, in which case that mode might be useless to you as well. And then we have flux loops. And yeah, that's it. like you've basically, so for this particular track that's loaded, because it's not a stemmed out track, I've basically just got 2 pad modes, which is kind of limiting, you know, for that instant gratification kind of side of things. There's not a whole lot going on here. There's not a lot of fun kind of tools to play with. It is functional, you know, these hot cues work great. The flux loops are all good. You've got beat jump up here on this one, and you've got a loop, which is my favorite way of working with loops. You've got a loop encoder. You just set your length and dial it in. And then the lights underneath do change to green when you're looping as well. So that is my favorite way of working with loops, but some people might prefer like a more auto beat loop pad mode as well. But yeah, there's no secondary pad modes or anything. It's just basically the 2 pad modes for this. Your key lock buttons in the middle, sync and master. The pitch sliders are fairly short, but also pretty accurate. You can dial in a BPM really nicely with these. You know, less than 1/10 of a BPM increments. There is no center click, there's no stop at 0, and there's no reset button either, which some people will prefer and some people won't. Some people will like a way to get quickly to 0, but with this you will have to dial it in ever so slightly to get locked right back to 0. But yeah, that's your kind of main pad modes. Now, of course, let me load up a track now that has got some stems on it. Let's do that. We can play with the stems here. So now we go into that mode and we can enable or disable each individual stem. And then by holding this one underneath, I can adjust the level for that stem. And I can also adjust the filter for that stem. I can't find a way in the default mapping of adjusting how much is sent to the effects from each stem, which is one of the cooler features of Traktor's stems integration. I might be missing that though, there might be something there, but I can't find a way to do it in the standard mapping anyway. And there's no stem EQ or anything like that, you know, for the different ones up here, you can't replace it, so. Functional, if basic stems controls, that's what I'll say there. We'll come up to our browsing. The browsing is actually really cool. You've got a nice big knob and you push down on that to load a track to a deck. You can also go through your favorites. You can add a track to your prepare playlist, and you've got the preview player as well. You wouldn't be able to hear this, but I could preview a track by pressing play, and that will show up then in the headphones, and I can scroll through that as well. And you have a view button on each side to view your full library as you go as well. So overall, I'm pretty happy with the browsing. You hold shift as well, you can go through your tree on the left and go through different playlists. It's functional, it works, it does the job very nicely. So now let's move on then to the effects and the pattern player. So let's come over to this deck. And I've got effects on this side. I'm going to assign the effects there. So this deck is now sending to effects number 1. And I've got a combo effects there. And depending on how you route it, you can go in and I'll make that post fader. And at that point it's post fader and post crossfader. And Traktor's effects are fantastic, and that's one of the advantages of the MX2 over some of the other more affordable Traktor hardware in the past. You do have the full effects controls here, which means you've got control of the effects themselves and also the pattern player. Their effects are just so high quality, absolutely superb. And the routing options are there, you can route them however you want. They are just absolutely superb. So now let's come over to this side where I've got a pattern player running. So I'm just going to put a loop onto this deck. And let's get the pattern player going. So at the moment I've got a standard 808 kick. I'm going to assign it to the channel. And let's take out the drums on this. Right, so we can now hear that 808 kick running. Can adjust the level of it. We can choose different sounds. We can adjust the pitch and the decay. Get a clap up there. And this is where this pad mode then comes into play. So we've got standard patterns. We can scroll through here. We've got the step sequencer basically, so we can see as we're changing it, the steps are changing. We've got 2 sections of it. And so we can see what that's doing, but we can also add our own in. So if I take it right out there and I can add some more in. And of course there are numerous different kits and what have you that you can work with as well. But you get everything synced up, you can get your pattern player running over the top of other things, and that is a lot of fun. You might have noticed that towards the end of that demo, my enthusiasm seemed to wane a little, and the truth is, it kind of did, because being really honest, I don't actually think the pattern player is a very fun feature. It offers a lot of creative possibilities, no doubt, for those who embrace it, but I wouldn't call it fun. I'm going to refer to the Flex 4 again, not because I'm a Pioneer DJ fanboy, but because it's the most popular controller in this price tier. If you exclude the sampler and only count the modes which have an effect on a playing track, it has 7 pad modes, including things like keyboard mode and 2 lots of pad effects. The MX2 has 2, sometimes 3 pad modes if you count stems, which I'll come back to. Lots of the pad modes on the Flex 4 duplicate functions which can be achieved in other ways on the MX2 like beat jump, but that doesn't take away from just how simple they are to use on the Flex 4. I think it was Ian Golden who first used the term instant gratification for DJ controls, and that's what the Flex 4 offers in spades. You can load a track, push different pad modes, and immediately start playing with, rather than just playing, your music. The MX2, not so much. And I have to point out that Traktor's greatest strength, the super advanced control it offers, is also its Achilles heel when we're talking about beginner DJs. I play with DJ gear for a living and was a full-time Traktor user for a couple of years, and yet during this review I still managed to get myself in a situation where I couldn't apply effects to deck B at one point, and I then spent half an hour trying to figure out why that was. Then we come to the stems. It's the biggest buzzword in DJ software right now, and I would argue that it is the very definition of a fun instant gratification feature. At the push of a button, you can mix the vocal of one track with the instrumentation of another, or any combination you like. But in Traktor, you still can't analyze stems on the fly. It has to be done before loading to a deck. And you can't even select a few tracks at once to do it ahead of time. You have to tell the software to do them one by one, and then it will queue them up, which doesn't even make sense. That analysis then spits out a stems file, which takes up a lot of space on your drive unless you manually delete it. And then when you load that track as a stems track, it's loading the stems file, not the original, which is the 4 stems all playing at once, and always, from my testing, sounds a fair bit worse than the original mastered file. You can't load a track as a track and then decide to use stems with it halfway through. If you didn't load it as stems, you're out of luck. And then, because of how their stems work, creating that file, it means you aren't able to use stems with streaming music in Traktor. The Beatport and Beatsource integration is otherwise really solid in Traktor Pro 4, and the MX2 comes with an extended 2-month trial for Beatport streaming, but there's no way to use stems with it, unlike on every other DJ software platform. Put simply, until Traktor gets real-time on-the-fly stems analysis, it's just behind the curve compared with all the other platforms. It's not even like their stems are superior to everyone else's. I'll give the pre-analysis a pass on Engine DJ because their hardware just can't do it on the fly, but on my Mac with Apple Silicon, there's no excuse for why Traktor can't pull it off. Algorithm can do it on my phone without breaking a sweat. So where does that leave the MX2? Well, it's very nice hardware let down by software which still, I think, hasn't caught up with the big trends in how DJs, especially beginners, want to interact with their music. What makes it an even harder sell is that the MX2 does cost a fair bit more than that aforementioned Flex 4, which has a street price of around €320. That's smaller, yes, but runs on USB bus power, works with Serato, Rekordbox and Algorithm natively, so can be used easily with a phone or tablet, and it gives beginners the choice of switching to a different platform at any point in their DJ journey. I fear that for the MX2 to really shake up the beginner market, it would either need to be incredibly cheap, or Traktor would need to be incredibly compelling for a new DJ, and as of right now, I don't think either of those is quite the case. So there you go, my thoughts on the Traktor MX2 from Native Instruments. I do think this hardware is actually really solid as a beginner device. It's well made, sounds good, and is incredibly spacious compared to much of the competition. I am disappointed that it can't run off USB bus power, and at €400 we're getting pretty close to the price point where I would be expecting at least one balanced output, but overall it is a good option, if you've decided that Traktor is the platform for you. And that's the real issue with it, I think. With the MX2, you are saying that you definitely want to DJ with a computer, not a mobile device, and that you're happy committing to that one piece of software moving forward, because there's no guarantee this will ever be supported by anything else. And I fear in today's beginner market, that lack of flexibility will be a big turn-off for many, which is a shame because I think this hardware is deserving of attention for sure. In the comments, I'd especially love to hear from beginners, those new to DJing. Tell us, what was the most important factor that swayed your first DJ equipment purchase? And if you're a more experienced DJ, what would you recommend to somebody who is starting out today? Sound off down below. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Beatsource Tech. If you liked it, be sure to give us a thumbs up, subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss any future videos. And hey, if you haven't already, you can try Beatsource for free and join DJcity for just $10. All the links are down in the description. I'll see you next time.